Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're gonna, I guess it's Happy Hump Day, maybe Trump Day, that kind of thing, but we're going to talk to you about the Trump rally. Trump is winning. He won a court injunction that was designed to prevent him from having his rally this Saturday in Tulsa, and we'll talk about the details of that in just a moment. And then the president yesterday afternoon issued an executive order about police reform, and of course he's being bashed from various sides about it, praised from others. We'll talk a little bit about what it means and how we're moving forward on the police brutality, if you want to call it that, issue. And then of all things, man, the city of Seattle, we've been talking about it for the last several days, about the Black Lives Matter and Antifa in there with them and other groups have taken over a 4 to now 9 block area, depending on how you look at it. But Seattle, the city of Seattle, has now built, of all things, a wall. They've built a wall to protect the Black Lives Matter protesters, I would guess, and we'll talk about that. It just gets crazier every day. Just when you think it's gotten as crazy as it might get, there's another layer added to it. But we start with the Trump rally. This from a Politico article. Judge denies injunction on Trump rally over social distance guidelines. An Oklahoma judge on Tuesday denied a request to stop a rally for President Trump in Tulsa unless its organizers impose social distance guidelines to combat the spread of coronavirus. So basically, they were doing the same things that North Carolina was trying to do to the GOP convention and Donald Trump with the social distancing. And as I said back then, oh, by the way, if you haven't heard, and I'm sure you probably have now, the bulk of the convention, the most important part where Donald Trump accepts the nomination as for President of the United States by the Republican Party, will be done about an hour north of where I live in Jacksonville, Florida. And I can tell you, most Floridians I've talked to are excited. But if you remember, one of the main issues in North Carolina was the idea of social distancing. And to understand what that would mean is basically in an arena like where Trump is going to hold, I hope, and I say hope because I'll expand on that in a moment, his rally in Tulsa, that about, you'd have to have about a seat or two between each one of the attendees, which would obviously cut the amount of people in half, let alone, I don't know how they would do it on the floor. But I guarantee you, and I said this about the GOP convention, had President Trump and the Republican Party gone along with social distancing at the convention in North Carolina, the media would have panned it and showed the crowd being sparse at a bunch of empty seats, and they would have said that shows that support for the president is waning. There's no question in my mind, and even if you hate Donald Trump, if you're honest, you got to believe that there's no question in your mind that the press, based on their past performance, would do exactly that. But so the President Trump has won so far, and I say so far because I'm not going to be comfortable until after the rally is actually done. But so far he is winning on the idea of holding a rally. Of course, they've tried to stop him. We'll talk about that as much. But have you noticed, and I mentioned this kind of casually, I think, on Monday. Oh, by the way, if you want to see our podcast, and more you are tuning in, there's a couple of ways you can do it, actually about 3 good ways. One is to go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. All of our videos are on there. You can go to our YouTube channel, John Martin Talks, spell it all out, and I would really appreciate a little more activity on that. That helps boost the show. And then, of course, America's Voice News. Not only do we broadcast every morning, if you're watching on Facebook, good morning, howdy, how you doing? Glad to have you here. But America's Voice News has a broad and growing network. And by the way, before I forget, if you want to see all things Trump, especially Trump rallies, America's Voice News is unbelievable in their coverage of Trump rallies, and we hope to cover some for them in the not too distant future ourselves. But America's Voice News, you can download the free app, Android, Apple. You can also go to Fire Stick, Roku, Apple TV, Dish Network, Channel 219, we're Universal now, and Pluto Network, and growing. Check it out. They archive our show on their site as well. But have you noticed, back to the story, Billy Bob tells me to get back to it. If you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, this is Billy Bob Bass. He has a Twitter handle, by the way, at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. Now that we got all that out of the way, on with the show. But the coronavirus stories have just been popping up breakneck everywhere. 2 weeks ago, there was almost no coronavirus stories because we were in full-scale protests, mostly peaceful, which means someone died, probably a police officer, an innocent bystander, burning and looting, that kind of thing. But peaceful protests combined with Antifa and Black Lives Matter shenanigans, all that was all you heard about. Coronavirus didn't fit the narrative of all those people pushing out in the street. But now it's back, baby. It's back. The coverage of it is certainly back. And so it's coronavirus 24/7, except when it comes to Black Lives Matter. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, the organization I'm talking about here, it's, corona's no big deal. They can gang up in mobs and all that, and it's not a problem. I just wanted to point that out to you, and I'll show you some pictures to prove it in just a moment. Earlier in the day, two Tulsa organizations, the Greenwood Cultural Club Center and the John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation, these are organizations in Tulsa that are surrounded by the Juneteenth kind of celebration, along with two immunocompromised residents of the city, had sued the operators of the BOK Center. That's where President Trump is going to hold his rally. They said the plaintiffs argued that the boisterous rally with crowds of people yelling in close proximity would be an incubator for another coronavirus outbreak. So it's coming out now that Donald Trump, there was an article I started to do a couple days ago, that Donald Trump, the great virus spreader, they're blaming now, they've gone full bore, blaming President Trump and Trump supporters now for spreading the virus. We don't give a hoot about the country. We don't care about public health. We're just Trump, and we're coming to infect you. We're infecting you with patriotism. That's probably what they're scared of. But it's funny how Trump supporters now are the virus spreaders, but others, not so much. And I got a couple pictures. The first picture I'm going to show you is a picture that was taken a few days ago in Seattle in this CHOP or Chaz or whatever they're calling it now, Chump I would call it. But this is actual photo from the streets of Seattle. And I don't see a whole lot of social distancing there. I don't know if they're swapping spit or swapping hand sanitizer. I would guess maybe a combination of both. So that's that. And then a few days later, just this past weekend, I think, this is a scene just a few days ago from Brooklyn, New York. I mean, New York City is like the hotbed spread of the virus, right? This is people protesting black, prejudice against black transvestites or transsexuals, I guess. And I didn't know that there was that big a problem. I can tell you, when I was living in New York in the 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of anti-trans anything. And matter of fact, they were pretty proud and pride. And I guess to show your pride, you got to show your, whatever. Because I can tell you, I did go to Gay Pride Parade in New York back in the mid-'80s. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. And I saw a lot, let's put it that way. And my point being, there's no real prejudice, certainly no organized prejudice against black trans. I mean, I guess Elizabeth Warren, she won't be able to read, from the Rose Garden. I guess if maybe she's vice president with Biden if he were to win. God help us if that's true. But, she was going to read the names of victims of black transvestite, oppression. I don't know. But COVID-19 does some strange things. Have you noticed that? Coronavirus has cured cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Nobody seems to be dying from that anymore. So, more power to that. I mean, you can't open your own business with a key, but it's okay to open it with a brick as long as you're, have the proper motivation. We've learned that all from coronavirus. Trump supporters, if you're wearing a MAGA hat, you're a spreader of the virus. But if you got a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, man, you can be like grouped together, passing out guns in Seattle to young white dudes like we showed you yesterday. If you hadn't seen that video, you need to check it out. Go to our podcast. I told you how. But, coronavirus, man, is amazing what it is able to do. And, but maybe Billy Bob tells me that it's not coronavirus that's causing all this. It's TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. And he's probably right about that. Plaintiffs ask an Oklahoma court to impose social distancing requirements for the rally, including the mandatory use of face masks, or else bar the rally until organizers agreed to implement them. But the plaintiffs were notified by the judge later on the phone that he had denied, I don't know if the name even comes out, but the judge denied their request for an injunction according to court records. I don't know who this judge is, but can we get him appointed to the Supreme Court like right now? Because it seems like we need a couple different judges based on some recent rulings up there. But, maybe we'll go into that another time. Oklahoma currently leaves social distancing guidelines at the discretion of business owners. Sporting venues have been permitted to reopen since May 1st. Now, that's the way that it always should have been. I'm not opposed to putting out guidelines and suggestions and everything like that. I still, and I'm hoping that once all this corona is passed, I'm hoping that we look into who gave them the power, all these little Napoleons, including, to be honest with you, President Trump, for shutting us down in the first place. I still don't see a constant. I mean, they didn't declare martial law. They didn't declare really a national state of emergency, I don't think. I don't see where it really in the Constitution gives them permission to shut your business down, in the first place. I'm still not convinced of that. And I would like to be. I'd like you to show me where in the Constitution it says. But anyway, that's another story, and we can pick it up on another day. But this idea that businesses should, at the discretion of the business owners, determine what social distancing is, I have no issue with that whatsoever. If, for instance, this venue were to say you have to practice these social distance, this is our choice and our venue, then the president could decide to go there or not. The fact that they are saying that it's because basically what they're saying is they want the business, and you can't really blame them for that. But you're always, and I've said this before, but if I say it, of course, it bears repeating, it is your personal responsibility to assess your own risk. You have every right, and I would say obligation, to assess the risk to you and your family, period. I mean, I got no issue with that. What I have an issue with, and this is where conservatives and the liberals, progressives differ a great deal. I tell you, you have the right to assess your risk. What you don't have is the right to assess mine. You can't assess my risk. I'm responsible for that. That's where we differ on some issues. Coronavirus cases have been rising in Tulsa since the beginning of the month. This is from the article, when some lockdown restrictions were lifted. But what they never mention in that, and I have no doubt that there's more coronavirus cases, that, Florida has seen, quote, a spike. But if you really dig a little deeper, and I'm not saying it's only because of this, but certainly a big factor in the uptick in coronavirus cases directly corresponds with more testing. Does that mean more people are actually infected? Not necessarily. But if you test more people, then you're going to find that more people were actually infected than you thought. That's just normal. But they don't put in the death rate and all those statistics, which actually show that this virus still, and I'm not downplaying the tragedy of the virus, but the reality is, and we talked a lot about this last week in one of our shows, the reality is when you plug in the actual numbers, the numbers that the government is putting out, both in the United States and around the world, you'll see that it's the proportion of people in world population, not just to mention U.S., is minuscule. And the amount of deaths is almost so low to actually measure. And that's just a fact, just a fact. I know it's maybe not a popular fact, but it's still a fact nonetheless. The Trump campaign already requires attendees. Check this out. This is what their program is. If you're attending the rally in Oklahoma, and by the way, they've got over 1 million people request tickets for this event. So Trump, I guess his support is just dropping, right? Over 1 million people. The Trump campaign already requires attendees to agree not to sue the campaign if they get sick. The campaign manager, Brad Parscale, who is just a genius, said attendees would get temperature checks, mask, and hand sanitizer before entering the venue. It sounds like they're trying to take reasonable precautions based on the guidelines. But here, and I'm halfway joking about this, but at the same time, you know it's a real fact of reality. It won't. How long is it going to take for some class action suit by some law firm or whatever to come out and say hand sanitizer causes cancer? You know it's coming. It's absolutely coming. So get ready to sign up for that one. The rally has already drawn considerable backlash because of its original planned date of June 19th, which is also Juneteenth, and that's basically the celebration of the true emancipation and everything else of slavery. A day celebrating endless slavery in the United States. Its location in Tulsa, which was the site of a major race massacre, we talked about that last week, in 1921, as protests against police brutality and racist violence have gripped cities around the country since last May. Trump agreed to move the rally back a day out of respect for the holiday. And I applaud the president for doing that. He's trying. The mainstream media gives him no credit for this kind of stuff. They mention it, but the reality, and this is something I haven't heard anyone else say, so it's one of the reasons why you need to watch shows like John Martin Talks and America's Voice News. Is probably the only place you're going to hear something like this said. Juneteenth, and this is not a criticism of that date whatsoever. It is a day to be celebrated. But the idea that campaigning and politics should be separated from Juneteenth, maybe it should, but the reality is it never has been. The Democratic Party has been campaigning big time on Juneteenth inside of churches, outside churches, everywhere for decades. In fact, if you're a Democratic candidate running for office and you don't show up to campaign at a Juneteenth celebration, that you will be called out on. But actually campaigning there, it is absolutely expected. Both of Tulsa's organizations filing the lawsuit work to memorialize those who were targeted in 1921 massacre, creating exhibits and educational curriculum. Fine thing to do. The massacre was, I want you to hear this. We talked in detail about it the other day. The massacre was perpetuated by white Tulsans, this is true, who burned down and killed a prosperous black economic area in the Greenwood district of the city. And that is absolutely true. Atrocities were committed. As many as 800 people, the official death count's much lower, but as many as 800 people, pretty much all black, are thought to have been killed during this event. But here's the thing they never, ever mention. It was all done by Democrats. It was a Democrat governor that called out the troops on black protesters at that time, or celebrants. It was Democrat sheriffs that locked them up. They were all Democrats. I mean, the truth needs to come out on all this stuff. If it were Republicans, that would have been the lead story on this. Donald Trump's party is the one that they don't mention party. The only time they don't mention party when it comes to anything that has to do with African Americans is when it was negative with the Democratic Party, which is most of the real story. And like slavery, I've been saying this for a while, but I'm going to keep telling you, if you want to do away with all vestiges of slavery, and I can get that. First of all, I don't agree with, and we're going to talk more about teaching your real history in just a few moments, but I don't have I can get along with that debate. We could have that debate about whether to remove everything that reminds us of slavery. I don't think it's a smart thing to do, but, we'll talk about that. I could have that conversation. But if you're serious about removing all vestiges of slavery and those that perpetuated it, then the Democratic Party has got to go away. It's got to at very least be renamed, and anything about the Democratic Party taken away, because make no mistake about it, the Democratic Party is the party of slavery. The Republican Party not only freed the slaves under Abraham Lincoln, but was established primarily as an abolitionist party to protest and do away with slavery. These facts, man, are a thing that sometimes get in the way, and the media never wants to tell you that. You're only going to hear the truth when you watch shows like us. And thank you so much for doing it. The plaintiffs emphasize in their complaint that their lawsuit concerns public health. Yeah, okay. Not Trump as a political figure. So it's got nothing to do with Donald Trump, nothing. And they have no intention to permanently cancel the rally. In fact, I would go so far to say that they will have, that if Donald Trump actually gets defeated, they will say, hey, rally all you want. You can rally every day. But until the election, it's unsafe. It's unsafe to rally. They argue, the plaintiffs, that they would take the same action if the rally were for Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic. Now, I'm wondering when Joe's going to get past presumptive. He's already got like over 2,000 delegates, way more than the number he needs. But the presumptive presidential nominee, a Joe Biden rally. So they really think we would treat a Joe Biden rally the same way? You know, well, that's something you're not going to have to worry too much about, because people automatically social distance at a Joe Biden. Has there even been a Joe Biden rally? Is there anyone out there? I keep asking this question, and I'd love you to chime in on whatever Facebook network you're listening to. And I'm serious. Is there anyone that is really passionate about Joe Biden? I mean, I see passion on the Democratic side, but that's zip to do with Joe Biden. The only passion I see on the Democratic side is just hatred for Donald Trump, Trump derangement syndrome. So I'd love to have a Biden supporter tell me why they support Joe Biden without ever mentioning anything to do with Donald Trump. Why are you? I know what you're against. You're against Trump, period. I get that. But what are you for, and how does Joe Biden actually fit in that calculation? I still hadn't really heard anybody, and I challenge you to tell me. But you know, you got to, you know, what do they? Bless their heart. Bless their heart. Their concern for Trump supporters is, you know, it's touching. It kind of gets you right here, doesn't it? Do you really believe they care about Trump? They hope that everybody wearing a red hat dies, man. If they could just go out and pop they wouldn't care whether it said Trump or not. You'd say, if you're wearing a red hat, you did. Red did, you know, that kind of thing. But hey, you know, by all means, keep old Joe in the basement. I mean, Terry McAuliffe, we played that video last week. We'll probably play it again where he says, yeah, we're doing good keeping old Joe in the basement. Let him stay there. And here's what they want to do is they want to keep Joe in the basement and keep Trump off the stage. That's just all it is. And mark my words, this is a prediction. When the time for debates, when Joe Biden, if he is the eventual presumptive to real nominee, there's going to be a push for some health reason or some other not to actually have debates, because they know, they being the hardcore leftists and the mainstream media, which are basically one and the same, they know that Joe Biden face-to-face with Donald Trump is a viral disaster for them. They know that. Anyway, let's move on to President Trump's executive orders. This is from a CNN article. And people ask me all the time, hang on 1 minute. They ask me all the time, why do you use like Politico and CNN and all that kind of stuff? And I use some others. But first of all, I read certain things, watch certain programs as a public service so you don't have to. But you know, old Sun Tzu talked about keeping your enemies close. So I try to do that, and I try to point out, because to me, you know, if all I did was tell you everything you agree with, probably be kind of boring. So I kind of use these. And CNN, man, one thing about them, they're not boring, preposterous from time to time, but not boring. Police reform. Trump offers full-throated defense of police executive action signing. So what is he supposed to do? Full-throated. He's supposed to just whisper it out, I'm with the police. You know, I don't think that works. President Donald Trump took his first concrete steps on Tuesday to address growing national outcry over police brutality, even as he offered a staunch defense of law enforcement that left little question about his allegiances. So he has aligned himself with law and order and the police. Now, they want to insinuate that that means that he is for police brutality and hunting black men. He's for the purge, so to speak. You know, I like how they say this little question about his allegiance. So I decided, because words matter, I've said this, if you're new to the show, first of all, welcome. Where you been? But glad to have you. You're in the right place now. As one of my buddies says, the truth starts now. But I believe words matter a great deal, I guess because I come from a long line of school teachers. But allegiance. So from time to time, I'll give you definitions. One of the definitions of allegiance is loyalty and commitment. And I don't always often do this, but sometimes it's interesting to look at the synonyms for a word. So I wanted to read you a couple of synonyms for allegiance and see, if this is something you want to stand with or not. So synonyms: loyalty. And this is all talking about the police. That's what they're saying, allegiance to the police. Faithfulness, bond or bonding, trueness. We can't have that, right? Reliability. Oh my God, thinking something might actually be reliable. And the last two, duty and patriotism. No wonder they hate Donald Trump's allegiances to the police, because duty and patriotism, oh man, aren't those words like, how far are we away from actually prohibiting the word patriotism? That if you say, hey, I'm patriotic American, you're racist. You're absolutely racist. It reminds me we had a county commissioner here when I was running back for county commission. The guy beat me fair and square. But I mentioned there was some Korean War veterans up there, and they were talking about some issues with the Veterans Advisory Board. And they were kind of chastised. And I stood up for them under public comment, and I said the words liberty. I said, these guys have defended our liberty. And one of the county commissioners, and this shows you how liberal, because this is the guy I was running against. I wasn't talking directly to him. He actually, in his closing remarks as a county commissioner at that meeting, he said that we hear the words like freedom and liberty that no longer have any real meaning in this country. And I was like, and of course I couldn't say anything because they wouldn't allow me. But think about that. An elected official, he's a Democrat, imagine that, about as hard far left as you can be, that you actually say that liberty and freedom are tired old words that basically no longer have meaning. And maybe he's right. I don't know. I think they have meaning to most of this audience, and they definitely have meaning to me. Speaking during and here, talk about bias. Listen to this, because I'm going to come back to this word. Speaking during a discursive noontime event in the Rose Garden, Trump initially sought to adopt a unifying tone. Oh my God. And he announced an executive order that, among other steps, creates a federal database for police officers with a history of using excessive force, which, by the way, I think is a great idea. But I love how they use the word discursive. You know what that means? It means rambling. So in other words, they're basically saying that Trump's just up there babbling. And bias, I mean, come on. Have they ever used that description of Joe Biden? Because Joe Biden gets up I don't even know if Joe Biden can wake up in the morning and say good morning. He'd probably say, good, what do you know the deal? I mean, give me a break, man. What kind of bias? It's just unbelievable. They're shoveling it to us in buckets, man. It was a performance, talking about Trump in the Rose Garden, that laid bare the balance Trump faces as he continues to embrace a hardline law and order mantle, as opposed to what? Everything's free, bring a brick and get a TV mantra? I don't know. Which he believes benefits him politically. It probably does. Even as he confronts a national reckoning over systematic racism in police departments and outcry over violent police tactics. One of the words or phrases I'm getting sick of hearing, and it's just all around 24/7, systematic racism. Systematic racism, in essence, means that it's codified racism. In other words, it is system-wide, that and it used to be that way. There was systematic racism. There's no question about that. And I'm not saying that, don't misunderstand me, please. I am not saying that racism doesn't exist. It absolutely does. Unfortunately, it seems to be embedded in the human psyche. So, and not everybody's racist, but every race is racist. I can tell you that. You talk about something that is unifying, every race has oppressed another race at some point. Am I saying that Black Americans hadn't been oppressed more than any other group in American history? No, absolutely. There's no question that they have. Is racism still rampant? You could debate that, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But systematic racism, that they keep saying, has been eliminated. That does not mean racism has been eliminated. You are treated equally, at least you're supposed to be. Now, individuals, here's where you got to hear me out on this. One thing about it, you can sign executive orders, you could pass whatever legislation you want. The one thing you can't do now maybe somewhere in the future you can, but you cannot legislate what is in a person's heart. If a person has an evil heart, if they have a racist heart, they have that. And there's nothing you can do to change that. God could change that, but we don't even want to talk about that, right? I believe that God can work miracles. He certainly has in my life. God can change the man, but legislation cannot change a person. And I keep coming back to this. Tell me what, and I put this challenge out, yet I have not heard a response from it. Tell me what new law, regulation, whatever you want to call it, would have prevented what happened to George Floyd. I mean, it's atrocious. That, to me, is the worst part about what happened to George Floyd. I mean, obviously his death was terrible to the family, all that kind of stuff. But to the nation, we had a chance to unify behind that. But the mainstream media, the progressive leftists that run the Democratic Party wouldn't have that. Because everyone I know admitted that man was over the top. And I think it was beyond racism. There's something dark in that police officer's heart, man. I mean, to do what he did. But here's the thing I'm asking you. Is there any piece of legislation that would have prevented that? The only thing I can see that would have prevented that, maybe if he had been called upon some of his stuff, which apparently that officer had a history, maybe that. So what President Trump is signing an executive order, maybe. But the biggest thing is the Democrats who controlled Minneapolis, and they still do, police chief all the way up to the mayor and all that, they had, and going back to Amy Klobuchar when she was like the attorney general, I guess, or whatever, district or whatever her position was at the time, this guy came under her watch and she let it pass. The Democrats that control the city, maybe they could have done something. But once that guy, that police officer, and I'm not even going to mention his name, was in uniform on that day and he got George Floyd and down in that, I don't think there's any legislation that would have stopped that if he was out in the field, because I believe he had darkness in his heart. And man, has he done a tremendous damage to this country. Trump said in his Rose Garden speech, reducing crime and raising standards are not opposite goals. They are not mutually exclusive. They work together. They all work together. And he's spot on about that. In his speech, Trump did not address the racism issue directly. Instead, he suggested that repeated instances of officers killing unarmed black Americans rested on a small number of individual officers. And that is a factually true statement. It just is. You could say it's whatever, you could debate the sensitivity of it, all that, but you cannot debate the fact that white police officers killing unarmed black man is almost statistically zero. It just really is. And I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's obviously happened. But it is a very small, it's not like anywhere, it's not even like 1%, which 1% would be way too many. But what he said, and it says, what President Trump said is absolutely true. But I keep showing you this meme, and it seems to be more, it's interesting how the history, George Orwell put it very clearly here. The more a society moves away from truth, doesn't want to hear the truth, the more they will punish and hate those who actually speak the truth. And I can tell you that from firsthand experience. But Trump went on to say in his speech here, he said, they're a very tiny, I used the word tiny, talking about police brutality. It's a very small percentage, but nobody wants to get rid of them more than the really good and great police officers. And that is a fact, man. You got to believe that when police officers themselves saw the video, and we've heard from a lot of them, but when they saw the video of what happened to George Floyd, can you imagine what their first thoughts were? Oh my God. I mean, I'm sure they felt for the victim, but they had to have thought, oh Lord, my job just got 1,000,000 times tougher. and there's going to be hell to pay. That you had to know that. Everyone knew that. I mean, when you saw that, I was hoping that we wouldn't see it. I think there was a small window of time where maybe we could have prevented some of the chaos that we've seen. But the mainstream media, the progressive leftists, the Democratic Party, they wouldn't allow that to happen. And these fringe groups, these Black Lives Matter groups and Antifa, they weren't going to have it. They weren't. I mean, all you got to do is look what happened up in Atlanta. The people were probably rightfully upset about some aspects of what happened in that shooting at that Wendy's. But who burned the Wendy's down? It looks like a white female they're looking for. There's pictures of her on the internet. Check it out if we can find them. That actually set that fire, wearing a mask and all that. So, black people out there, I'm just telling you, man, and I'm laying it on some white folks are trying to take away whatever chance you have at a legitimate, peaceful protest. These Black Lives Matter groups, these groups of Antifa, they are trying to rob you of the peaceful protest, that's for sure. But President Trump went on to lambast, according to the article, lambast efforts to defund departments and said police were owed respect for their work, recalling officers who ran into, we forget this, who ran into a burning World Trade Center on September 11th as firefighters. I mean, think about this. How many people, when they see people in trouble, run into the fire instead of away from it? Our police officers, our firefighters, our first responders, they do it on a daily basis. And we're going to just throw them out? I mean, it's just crazy, man. But I've been posting this on some of my Facebook sites. I want to post this meme because I mean it from the bottom of my heart. We can't hardly, you might not hear us right now, police officers, just like this thing says, but there are millions of people like me who greatly respect. It's not to say that there aren't some bad apples out there, as they say, but we greatly respect and appreciate what you do for us. It doesn't get said enough. My dad probably summed all of this up the best I've heard, and Father's Day's coming up. I just posted a little something on my personal Facebook page about my dad. But one of the things he used to say is there's no higher percentage of bad cops than there are crooked hair barbers. He said the difference is the damage they can do. One bad cop can do a ton of damage, like we saw in Minneapolis, may have fundamentally set us back for sure, may change America in ways that we don't want it to, and maybe in ways we want it to. But, a crooked barber just give you a bad haircut. I got my first store-bought haircut yesterday. I talked about it. Don't I look pretty? Ain't I pretty? But thank you to the police officers. It doesn't get said enough. Trump said Americans demand law and order and hail the efforts of law enforcement to quell violence during protests against police brutality earlier this month. He said, without police, there is chaos. Amen. And the congregation said amen. Later, Trump veered from a speech about police reform to launch a political attack falsely, always they want to put without evidence, falsely claiming that his predecessor, Barack Obama, along with his current election rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, did not attempt to address police reform issues and when they were in office. But they don't present any evidence of that themselves. I mean, really, what did Barack Obama do to squelch racial animosity, violence, police brutality in this country? If anything, he fanned the flames of it somewhat. I could make a case about that with evidence, by the way. If you want some, just let me know and I'll present it to you. But I don't think there's any question that Obama, I mean, there are black people who have vocalized this, that said that Obama was the first gay president, not the first black president, because there are many, many black people. Of course, millions of them actually voted for him, and I get that. But there are many black people who don't really think that Obama took advantage of being the first black president for the black community at all. I mean, they really don't. And far as Biden, oh my God, Biden, man, what has he done for black America? Really? Name me one thing that Joe Biden, in his 50 years basically in elected office, has actually done for black people. I can tell you one thing that he's done for black people. He's pushed bills that locked a lot more black people up. I want to play this video right now. It's pretty long. I might stop it before we're done. It's something that you don't see too often. What it is Joe Biden, much younger man, senator, on the Senate floor, pushing his bill the Clinton crime bill, which he co-sponsored in the Senate, and he's telling you why. And I want to make it clear to you, what he's talking about is black versus white. He's defending the bill as it's protecting his family members, which are basically all white, against, I guess what he said in later videos not too long ago, cockroaches, young black people. That's what he said in another video. We played that before. But keep in mind, it very specifically, he is separating this down racial lines, and he even says about all the things that have happened in the black community that he doesn't care about. Check it out.
Back to the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society.
That's good.
We have no choice but to take them out.
Black America, are you listening? This is your savior, Joe Biden, who in that video, you need to look at it again if you didn't catch it. He is saying that it doesn't matter what caused your children. He's talking about your children. It doesn't matter what caused it. You know, his lack of doing anything helped to cause it. It doesn't matter what caused it. They're beyond the pale, means they're beyond redemption. No one is beyond redemption. No one. They may be beyond human health. I get emotional when I think about this because I know what God has done. I don't preach a lot about this, but when you say something that no one, that they're beyond the pale, that bothers me because you're saying there is no hope for them as a human being. I refuse to believe that. I'm not excusing behavior. I think people should be prosecuted for what they do, to be held accountable. But to say that there is no hope for a human being is just wrong, in my opinion, especially when he talks about it in such broad terms. That, if you want to get truly woke and realize that that guy right there is who you are saying is fit to lead this nation. Forget everything else right there. I mean, I don't see how you can support him and think you care about any black neighborhood. If black lives truly matter, and they do, how can you vote for Joe Biden? Because he's saying it don't matter. They're the future predators. They're beyond the pale. And in that other video we've played jokingly a few times, they're cockroaches. That's the guy you're putting your hope in. Oh my God, man. Just if you're going to get woke, get woke. All right, we only got about a minute left. I want to show a quick picture of a wall that's being built in, this is from Breitbart. We can't get too deep into it, but check it out. There's a picture of some construction workers they're building a wall around the 4 blocks of like the 9-block area that Black Lives Matter is now taking up. So I guess walls do matter. They claim that they're trying to isolate this so police vehicles can actually get into that area. And they say they want to have, be able to at least respond to 911 calls. And I wonder why they can't. There's a couple of other pictures. We got a minute to put them up that shows the current state of the police precinct in that part of town. It is just incredible. So in Seattle, it looks like the liberal progressive government that has overrun the state of Washington is basically preparing to let these people take over that portion of the city and maybe even expand for a long time. They're settling in for a long time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. Check out all the ways you can watch our show. But I will pray for your family. You pray for mine. Man, I think one thing we should all agree on, we can all pray for this great nation. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.